The Williams floor compared to the Red Bull floor. It literally, Chandler showed us a picture. It was a smooth brain versus an actual brain.
It's flat, and that's all. It is literally flat. Like
It's just
Welcome back, everyone, to Figuring Out the Formula. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Chan and Patrick, as always. We just got done with round 8 of the Formula One season. It is the Spanish Grand Prix. Last weekend was the Monaco Grand Prix. It was a very boring race, but the weekend leading up to it was pretty fun. We talked last week about the upgrades that teams were bringing to the Spanish Grand Prix. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. Chan, what were some losers that brought upgrades to the track?
So to me, the main number one loser was Williams, just because this was kind of their first. Some teams will do some minor upgrades here. This was their first kind of rollout with everything. To give you in-depth to tell what Williams basically did, and this is the engineer and scientist in me enjoying this, but basically they have like the flaps on the front of their car on the front wings that they added to make it longer to give a little more aero, but then they also had an alternative bodywork with a cooling package. So obviously the cars get very hot with the engine and the gearbox. So they added some cooling to keep it cool and make it more efficient whenever you're keeping it cool. But we saw during this race weekend, during the practice times, everything just absolutely nothing. And we'll get more into it. We had a little bit of a revelation when it came to Williams as to
how bad they really were.
Look, as someone brought it up too, is that James Vowles made a comment during early preseason of just how him going from Mercedes to Williams is amazed that there are some teams on the grid that still do things the way they do things, and we learned that Williams was he was exactly about how behind Williams is in the game. So they were the number one losers. The other ones who I don't know if I classify some of them as losers. But really, what I'd say is from a lot of them, it's a real who can say. We can't really tell one way or the other. I think AlphaTauri is more on the loser side of things. Just to give you a brief, what they did is the rear wing flap. They made a couple of little modifications to kind of make it a little more slender, make a little more aerodynamics, and then they also had a new modified rear wing end plate again for that efficiency and that aero. But they were a little bit better, but it's hard to tell with them because they didn't have just that outstanding week. For example, Alpine in Monaco, where's Alpine been all year? And then all of a sudden you've got Esteban
on the podium.
Yeah, it gets a podium at Monaco, and they actually followed it up this week. So to me, that's a winner, and they're not really included in this week since, I said, they rolled it out at Monaco. And so I'd still say AlphaTauri is more on the loser side of things, but you really get into the three that I would consider in the middle. I still don't really know much of how it is Aston Martin. First off, this was going to be their first package. They have, I think, 3 big packages. They're kind of rolling out one big upgrade in the stretch of 3. Just, I know this happened after the race, but Fernando made the comment that, so they had one in Spain. They're rolling out another part of their upgrade next race in Canada, and then 2 weeks after that in Silverstone in Britain. So it's really kind of, we'll see how it looks come Silverstone whenever their full upgrade package is there. But they did a lot of front wing end plate upgrades to get the airflow around the front tires better, just to kind of help them punch through that air a little bit. We'll see how that turns out. I'll say this, we didn't see a drop off. So the good thing is that this part of the upgrade didn't make them go slower. So I think a lot of people caught up around them. And then McLaren, we'll get into qualifying. McLaren's it's not a huge upgrade, but they did do a front brake duct and winglet, reprofiling to kind of make that a little more aerodynamic. Look, in qualifying, we'll get to it. We saw great results from Lando, and speaking. After we discuss the race, we'll see that he was able to fight back with the upgrade to be a little bit more competitive. But just because of what happened in the race, it's kind of hard to make a decision on that. And then Ferrari. So Ferrari, we always say Ferrari's going to Ferrari, but we get in and one of the drivers just has an awesome, I won't say out of nowhere, but unexpected race weekend for the most part. And there's a couple of slip ups, and then another racer goes, out in Q1, like never contends for anything. And then they even have issues on the car after qualifying where they can't figure out what's wrong with the car. So they actually brought in the thing that kind of like we really got to see something next race weekend is because Ferrari had planned this for later in the year, but because of how bad they were performing to start season, they went ahead and sped it up and brought it in now. So they redesigned their floor, which the floor of the F1 car has been a big talk since Monaco. And we saw Checo's car get lifted. And again, that continued this week. So they redesigned their floor. Obviously, they had that in the works long before Monaco. But then also they did their side pods. They did away with the one thing that was making me love the Ferrari car, and that's the bird bath side pods.
With these upgrades, it's not like someone plans it and it's on the car the next week. It takes months and sometimes years, depending on how drastic the change is, to make sure the aero is proper, make sure the balance, the weight, make sure everything's good to go, and they're within the standards of the FIA. So for some of these teams, they hit the nail on the head. Some of them they didn't. Chandler, I agree. You discuss a lot of the losers. I think my biggest loser has to be Haas. They didn't do anything. They haven't presented any upgrades or anything yet. They haven't even had notions of it. Like all these teams have said, yeah, like Aston Martin said they'll have a huge upgrade available at Silverstone. Haas hasn't said, come Coda, we'll have it, it's the end of the year or whatever. It doesn't matter. They've never said we're going to have upgrades available then.
And you looked last year with them is that they only had all these teams had like 2 and 3 upgrades throughout the year. Haas had one upgrade that was supposed to be in Austria, and they were only able to roll it out on one of the cars in Austria, Kevin Magnussen's, and then they were on, and that made you could see a visible drop off in Kevin Magnussen's car, but they continue to continue to fabricate and get the upgrade ready for Mick Schumacher's car, even though they're seeing such a drop off. And Haas really fell off the wagon whenever they gave their upgrade. It was really a downgrade. So
I would debate that you can't fall off the wagon if you never were on the wagon.
Fair point.
Haas's best upgrade in previous years was getting rid of their Crawley sponsorship. That was the best upgrade they've had, and it's not even performance based.
And you're Crawley driver too.
Yeah, that too.
That's a great point, Kyle. I forgot about Haas. Honestly, I kind of forgot they existed.
Who?
Yeah, who? So Ferrari actually was my biggest disappointment. Because throughout the season, constantly on the Ferrari radios, you keep hearing about their tire degradation. Like they're constantly saying, oh, my tires are falling off so quick. And then that's seemingly where they're losing most of their pace. I don't think they had a crazy problem with the aero design, but they're definitely trying to pull an old switcheroo and, just do what everyone else is doing. But most of their upgrades were actually designed to reduce the tire degradation, and they pretty much just didn't solve that problem at all. So it's kind of like they spent all their money on nothing, literally. But yeah, I definitely think there were a lot of losers, and it's honestly usually pretty hit or miss.
To piggyback off what Pat's saying, basically the way you set up your aero is how much downforce your car gets. That also determines how much grip your tires have and how long they last. So you can see the Red Bulls, they've made soft tires last 3 times what Pirelli tells us that they should last. So clearly Red Bull's got it figured out.
Right.
Ferrari, on the other hand, they're doing the exact opposite. Their tire life is way shorter than what Pirelli tells us. So their setup is incorrect. So
yeah, and like I was saying, it's usually hit or miss. It's either probably going to be pretty bad or probably going to be pretty good. Now we talked about the misses. Now there were a couple people that were, they were hitting. Now Red Bull, they're obviously destroying the pack, winning races by 20 plus seconds. They actually do still bring upgrades. They still try to make sure they're keeping a safe distance. So they actually had revised some of their floor edges and some of their diffusers, which for those of you that don't know, the diffusers at the back of the car, it's a component below the wing that basically...
It sucks the car down to the ground. So it keeps the air trapped to make sure the car is as tight to the ground as it can get. That's basically the easy way to put it.
It's basically the final point for all the air going over the car. So they had modified their diffusers as well, but those were pretty minor upgrades for them. They honestly don't really need many upgrades. But the biggest winner this week, I think, was actually Mercedes. So we had talked in preseason testing about how last year Mercedes tried to come out with this zero side pod design where it looked like they were driving a pencil and everybody thought they were going to have a rocket ship, and it flopped to be
the infamous George Russell clip of he's like, I looked at that and was like, fuck, this looks fast.
Yeah. The Drive to Survive, that got all of us involved. And it's looking back, Drive to Survive is always behind. Obviously, it's a culmination of the previous season. So since the three of us and you listeners follow Formula One, it's pretty funny to keep track of everything that's going on, and then to see Drive to Survive when it comes out. George Russell saying the Mercedes looks so fast was, I mean, it was just comical as all cat. Like, it was crazy. But
so they've pretty much ditched that concept.
Well, it took Lewis Hamilton bitching the entire season last year and this year to finally say, okay,
maybe let's try something else.
Yeah.
So their main modification was their side pods. They're not quite as dramatic as, say, Red Bull or like Aston Martin, but they definitely are very similar now. They're kind of like Williams looking, but obviously because they have money, there's probably some intricacies that are way better. That was the big thing. They did also just make a lot of adjustments to the positioning of parts on their car. So the wishbone fairings, which those are just kind of split brackets that connect the wheels to the front of the car, they had actually raised those up to improve their airflow.
Are those suspension parts, or what are those are just braces?
So those are part of the suspension. I can't really draw it with my hands, but if you look at the front of an F1 car, you'll see at the very front there's two kind of braces that stick off in different directions and attach to the wheel. Those are the wishbone fairings.
Gotcha.
So they raised those up, and then they had changed their rear wing camber, which is just the angle of the rear wing, so they could get some more downforce. And then they added some small winglets to their rear brake ducts, and then because of the side pod upgrades, they also removed like a small vane that was attached to their mirrors. And honestly, I think their upgrades, really shined this week. I don't know if, we were talking about how Aston Martin, we couldn't really tell. I saw Mercedes, we'll talk about the race later, but, they looked way more competitive than Aston Martin for once. And I don't know if that's just the Aston upgrades failing or the Mercedes upgrades being that much better. But
let me pose this question to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that they went less aggressive because they were afraid of copying Red Bull and Aston Martin? Or do you think that that's just what their engineers settled on? Because I did say that it takes a while to get these going.
I think
where are you guys
that
at?
they just kind of settled.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they didn't want to do anything too crazy in case it didn't work and they needed to switch back quickly. So I don't think that I don't think any F1 team is really worried about copying anyone else, unless it's something kind of blatant like the pink Mercedes a few years ago.
Yeah.
But it's definitely because with upgrades, it's such a big risk. It really was just kind of a gamble, and it really did pay off. So I think they're definitely going to go way heavier with it with their next upgrades. But I don't think that they were trying to risk too much right now. They just didn't want to fall too far behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. You look at it from a long-term, year-long goal of, hey, you're in a tight battle with Aston Martin right now. That tight battle with Aston right now is mainly Fernando. So you're kind of thinking like, okay, if these upgrades at least get Lance into the top 10 consistently, we need to just keep up with that because there's big money between second and third in any position, but second and third. And so it's kind of like, obviously you're not going to, any engineer that thinks that like, or in the F1 world that thinks they're going to jump from where Mercedes has been to catch Red Bull, even with like Red Bull, like not let alone Red Bull, like now you can't, not even where they are before any upgrades. So you're not looking at that. You're kind of looking at, let's get me to keep me in the race until obviously, hey, if this slight marginal upgrade works, we'll take another step on top of that.
Or as long as Mercedes gets above Aston Martin and stays there, that's
Correct.
a win. That's a win for the season for them.
Especially you look at the fact that really between Aston and Mercedes, they're both starting to pull away from the rest of the field. Then if you realize, okay, we're falling a little bit back behind Aston, but we are so far clear of everybody else, we're not worried about that. That's when you make that extreme jump. But right now, like Pat said, you don't want to go from the extreme of no side pods to like hula hoop side pods. And then you're in the same exact position that you were for the upgrade. You spend all that money. So
spend all that money to go from slow to slow. It doesn't work out, but no, I get it. Yeah. So that was the winners and losers for the past upgrades that everyone brought to either Monaco or to the Spanish Grand Prix. We talked a little bit about the Williams floor, and last episode we talked about the Red Bull floor when Checo got raised up by the crane 4,000 feet in the air to where everyone got to take pictures of it. Well, this race weekend in FP3, Logan Sargent crashed, and same thing. The crane operator was like, hold my beer to the Monaco guy, and raised Logan Sargent's car up. To see the difference between Adrian Newey's Red Bull floor and insert name here, Red Bull floor at
Brackley University, and
he's from University of Phoenix Online, because
ITT Tech.
Yeah, it might as well be the Williams floor compared to the Red Bull floor. It literally, Chandler showed us a picture. It was a smooth brain versus an actual brain.
It's flat, and that's all. It is literally flat. Like there's nothing. No.
It's a floor. It's a floor.
It's like taking the pants off like a Barbie doll. There's just nothing there. It's just flat. Like it's terrible.
You do that a lot. You do that a lot.
You can.
Like
you can call Williams a lot of things, but you can definitely call them broke, because there was fucking nothing under that car.
And that's James Vowles, who went from Mercedes, Valtteri it's James, to Williams. He made a comment earlier in the season talking about how it's amazing how like his world and knowledge of F1 being with Mercedes, coming from the team that won 7 straight constructor championships, going to this, he's like, I was just shocked that people still that some teams still do things the way they do. I think it was something to do with like, I don't think it was the floor specifically, but there was a part of the car that wasn't designed in like CFD analysis software. It was literally done in like AutoCAD. And he was just like blown away. He's like, that's how you're designing your cars? Like, you don't have this and this. And they're like, no, we can't afford all that. So
the basic difference between the top tier teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, now McLaren, now that they have a bunch of sponsors and stuff like that, between those teams and they do have a lot of money coming in.
Yeah, it ain't going to the performance, though.
Not yet. There's a wind tunnel being built. Anyways, the top tier teams compared to the midfield and the back markers is huge. I mean, Gene Haas can only put so many $20 bills into that car. Williams, it's the same thing. Williams, their car was flat. Their floor was flat. It literally looked like a kindergartner tried to draw a Formula One car. Red Bull had all these intricacies, lines going up and down the car, crazy. And you can see the difference in performance, obviously. My thing is, I already talked about how it takes a while for these upgrades to come. With Vols being at Williams now, I think next year they're going to compete for the upper midfield. He's not going to allow that shit, especially after their PR nightmare they had when the pictures of Logan Sargent's floor came out. I mean, they're getting flamed left and right, just like we are. So I think that was a big turning point for that team.
Yeah, and it takes a couple times. It's not, obviously James got here this year. It's not going to happen in a year. But, and I really do hope that he turns it around because he's very good. Yeah, it's honestly like, we talk about it and we think like how the bottom back markers are always like that. But to see it like comparison, like especially like back-to-back weeks too. Like if say that this happened a month or two down the road, we probably would have been like, wow. But then because it happened so close together, it's just like mind-blowing of the difference. And it's like, and I'll give kudos to Alex Albon. How is Alex Albon even like, he's making me and Patrick think about, he was at the beginning of the year, we didn't have to think about it. We were hammering Alex Albon on the points. Now we at least have to think about it and say, well, maybe not. But still, to even like have the mindset of having some people who are knowledgeable about sport thinking he could get top 10 in that car is kudos to him.
A comparison is in football. There's been videos that surface that LSU have air conditioned helmets for their players now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Red Bull floor. The Williams floor is Rudy's helmet from the movie Rudy, where it has like one bar going across, That's the comparison. So as soon as they get old Rudy, who was offsides, let me point that out. Amen. As soon as they get him an air conditioned helmet, Williams should be able to compete better. Whether that happens or not, I guess we'll see. That was the practice session. Nothing else happened during FP1, FP2, FP3. There wasn't a whole lot of other drama. You guys have anything that you want to point out other than maybe some relationships or something like that?
Championships and titles is chips. So, the chips don't lie. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, was
not
seen
8.
out. Do what?
Not 8 time.
Not eight. And depending how the Felipe Massa's lawsuit goes, maybe not even 7. But anyhow, this is now a rumor that, the Fernando and Taylor Swift have kind of fizzled out, especially since, Taylor Swift's been now officially broken up with Matt Healy. But the new relationship drama in F1 is Lewis Hamilton has been spotted with Shakira, and this happened at Monaco and moved all throughout the week. We've seen it again. And then even today, which I know is past the race week, but more pictures today of them at a dinner with Shakira all up on him. So that is, we'll monitor that. We'll keep an eye on that and see, how we're feeling about that next week. But the only other, I don't know, drama per se, and this, I'm 90% sure this happened after the Monaco race. Might have been. I don't think we talked about it last week, even if it did happen before. But Haas has struck a deal with Alfa Romeo. So starting in 2024, because, obviously this is Alfa Romeo's last year as the title sponsor for the Sauber team. So Audi is taking over. Is it Audi that's taking over that one? Yes, yeah, Audi's taking over that one in 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So there is 1 year where it'll just be the Sauber racing team. But Alfa Romeo is not completely getting out of the game. Alfa signed a title deal with Haas. So will be interesting to see, A, how much money comes in, B, how this team is rebranded. Obviously we're so used to seeing the Haas on the back. Are we going to see the same Alfa Romeo rear wing end plate on the back? Or is it going to be, Haas, kind of the old, was it Rich energy drink or energy drink where the black and gold cars were like that logo was slapped all over the car or something like that. Who knows? We'll see. Probably, truthfully, all this does is just give Gene another place to hide some money from the IRS. But it'll be interesting to see, how much influence Alfa Romeo has with this, to see if we see any. If we don't see any improvement, then we're probably thinking there's not much influence. But if we see some improvement, it's definitely Alfa, and it's not Haas. So more details on that have probably come out later on in the year, just because we do still have a season of Alfa Romeo controlling the Sauber team. So, but a couple of things to be monitoring. So exciting, kind of keep a watch on. So,
yeah, whether you're into Shakira or not, I guess that's something that is going to be shoved down your throat. Chandler will definitely be keeping up with that. Me and Pat, on the other hand, I don't know. We're not really as emotionally as invested as we were with Taylor Swift and Fernando, but to each is their own.
I'm not saying that I'm like emotionally invested as much. But just
you're lying.
Yeah, you are.
You're lying. You definitely are. But
just take the cap off.
Yeah. Chandler discussed the importance of sponsors and title sponsors and all that stuff like that. It has to do with money. Money's everything in F1. You get a lot, the better you do. You get less, the shittier you do. Simple as that. The thing that most people don't realize is how much money that teams spend on travel throughout the season and the logistics behind it. Let's move right into Pat's paddock. And Pat, why don't you explain some of this business aspect of it?
Sure. So welcome back, everyone, to Pat's paddock. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the actual logistics of Formula One. So Formula One, as we all know, it's a calendar that travels all across the globe for pretty much the entire year. Sometimes, back-to-back weeks, sometimes 3 back-to-back weeks, sometimes there's a 4-week break. Now, F1 has a lot of moving parts. There's a ton of people that work for, every F1 team. They've got all kinds of equipment from, whatever they have to use for like radios and the pit wall to whatever tools they have to use to set up the car, to all the car parts themselves, to all the backups for the car parts themselves, even to everyone's favorite Red Bull catering. So F1 actually partners with DHL, despite their personal unsatisfactory service. They are great for F1.
Just not for t-shirts or illegal AliExpress things. Other than that,
they're great. But they actually have a team of about 40-ish people that are present at every race weekend that are just dictating the logistics and where everything's supposed to go for an F1 team. And then they also actually have a fleet of about seven jumbo jets that they use. And so, if it's a week like this where they're going from Spain all the way over to Canada, everybody packs all their stuff up collectively onto these, handful of jets. And then they're flown across the Atlantic or the Pacific, based on wherever they're going. And then they get unpacked. Now, that's obviously for like the most important stuff, probably for like the chassis and the car parts, stuff like that. Now, for say things like the motorhomes or like catering or office stuff like that, they also have a dedicated network of like ocean vessels that carry, I want to say, 35 shipping containers. And so, if they have X amount of weeks before a race week, they can just send that stuff because it'll take much longer. And it's a whole big mess, especially when you have situations like in 2020 where, races were getting canceled left and right, and then they were switching destinations a few weeks before. It was an absolute nightmare for DHL. But, they pay the big bucks to get the sponsors, and they have some people that are just out of their mind good with coordinating planes and trucks and things like that. The teams themselves, because most of them are based in Europe, they actually also do have their own trucks. They're these super fancy looking 18-wheelers. People will see them whenever they're going to like Belgium or Italy or something, driving around and taking all this stuff. And everything pretty much gets there on like a Monday or Tuesday. And then that's when the team set everything up. Now, if you ever go to an F1 race and you ever want to see a bunch of people from the F1 teams, the best time to leave is on Tuesday. Most of Sunday night and Monday, the teams are packing everything up. And then, as the three of us saw in Austin last year, we left on Tuesday, and we're walking through the airport, and all of a sudden I see a guy with Red Bull backpack. It's like, oh yeah, it's team issue. Well, then start seeing Williams, Alpine, Aston Martin. Literally everybody.
They were all there. Literally every team's mechanics were there.
They were all on the same flight to Mexico City on Tuesday. So it's a ton of moving parts for.
You're forgetting that some of the drivers take that too.
Yeah,
hold on. Yeah, just don't.
Before you get into the rest of your spiel, we the three of us were sitting there getting a beer and some fries, whatever, before our flight took off, and we're looking at every single team that was walking by, like, oh damn, is there anybody?
I forgot about this. Yeah,
I was like, is there anyone we know? Like, what the fuck? And out of nowhere comes the absolute goat of F1, Nicholas Latifi. He drove for Williams before he got replaced because he sucks at all honesty. But he was the only driver to fly with the team on basically what is a Cessna fucking shitty plane. It was a private plane, but
it was a charter jet that was like it was a Mexican airline that flew to Austin to take it to Mexico City. And you look at the plane and like in Austin airport, you have all these like Delta jets, Boeing jets, all the stuff, the jet bridge builds right up to it. Not this plane. This was the prop engine plane that like you could fit like 100 people on the plane, but it's still the prop engine plane with jet bridge. No says I. You're going down the stairs and walking across the tarmac.
Yeah, but it's like you see all these people who belong in F1 who work in F1. They have their backpacks, their jackets, all this stuff, and then you see Goat Tiffy with a hood on. You're like, you motherfucker, I know who you are. Okay, the fact that you're in the airport as the only driver, like.
That's pretty pathetic.
That's pretty fucked up, Williams. But
my question to that was like, I would have had like less of a question if like Alex Albon was also getting on that plane.
Was with him, yeah.
Where was Alex? I was like,
he was on a jet with another driver.
Alex has friends.
Wasn't it like didn't like the Red Bull AlphaTauri team like bring him on since he like drove for them? Like Max was just like, come on, you can ride with us. Like, sorry, crazy. Nicholas. One last sidebar on Latifi, because I know there won't be an opportunity for this anymore because he's departed from our sport. But the fact of the matter is that Nicholas Latifi only got to drive his home Grand Prix one time. And therefore, we were there for it, but they had the Nicholas Latifi grandstands that we had the pleasure, honor, privilege of sitting in, me and Patrick's brother, Chris. They have already removed the name. So it is now just Grandstand 42 this year. So the Lance Stroll Grandstand is still in full effect and is sold out. But the Nicholas Latifi, it had been named the Nicholas Latifi Grandstand for 3 years, but because it got canceled because of COVID, he never got to race in it except for 1 year. And now they have already said, you're out of F1. Sorry, you're gone. Like,
moving on, it's a ton of logistics to move all that stuff from week to week. There are also a lot of complaints about why the schedule is the way it is. For instance, why we were in Spain this past week, we're about to go to Canada, and then we're about to come back to Europe. A lot of that has to do with really weird, environmental stuff based on where you are. So for instance, Canada, it's frozen until late April, but the rest of the calendar is already congested, and then it's going to freeze over again by September. Now, if you go to Japan and Singapore, they can't do it in the summer because of their typhoon season, but they can't do it in the beginning of the season because they have contract stipulations because they potentially want the world champion crown there, like we saw in Suzuka last year, things like that. I'll talk about it more later this year. But there's a whole other shebang about, why the calendar is the way it is, but the logistics of F1 are pretty crazy. DHL handles it really well to get everything there every week.
So Sebastian Vettel, our friend of the business, he was at Monaco last week. We didn't see this until Monday, Tuesday, but he was at Monaco, kind of very off the scenes. They didn't, the coverage on Sky Sports and ESPN did not show him, so they obviously didn't see him. Apparently, he had been in some meetings with several different teams, as well as Stefano Domenicali, Formula One president, whatever you want to call it, director. And it's reported that F1 has actually offered Sebastian Vettel I don't know the official title, but it's basically the director of sustainability. So, okay. Sebastian Vettel in his time, he always uses platform for not necessarily always not just environmental issues, but social issues, worldwide issues, specific to the locations. The most pertinent one that pops to my head is when he came to Miami for the very first race in Miami, he wore a thing where it was a driver helmet with a snorkeling mask and water up here saying 2050, Miami Grand Prix, first Grand Prix underwater. So haven't heard much traction on that since last Monday, but definitely something to keep an eye on. I think that Sebastian would be a good fit in it. Especially,
except he should have wore that shirt to Imola this year.
That's the running joke. Yes. Unfortunately, that is
Hold your breath.
Sad to say that Imola was closer to a sail Grand Prix than a motor racing Grand Prix. But yeah, so it's always good to have legends.
Anyways, that was Pat's paddock. We move into qualifying. Not a whole lot went on during qualifying. During Q1 was the craziest part. Basically, it started to drizzle right before qualifying started. The track was damp, but it wasn't wet. The lines were dry, but if you went off the line by maybe a meter or a yard, if you're in America,
you're done. That's what happened. Yeah.
You're done. Yeah. You were spinning out. I mean, I remember looking up at the TV and seeing every replay, every camera angle was a different car spinning out. It was like they couldn't show the replays fast enough because another car was spinning out. It's like,
and
what the fuck is going on?
Turn 1 and it's gone.
Yeah. It was like literally side by side. They'd show the replay and then a brand new replay of someone else
in a replay.
It was replayception. That's what it was. It was a big shit show at the start of Q1. I mean, I think maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 cars actually completed a lap with a flying lap with a time at that point. And then they red flagged it. They were red flag Q1 because not because of the rain, but because of the gravel from everyone spinning off the fucking track. The thing is, they don't have sweeper trucks. Like NASCAR has sweeper trucks, IndyCar has sweeper trucks to get the marbles out of the way. They had marshals out there with a fucking broom saying, all right, giddy up. So the red flag took a bit, but there was nothing else that went on during Q1. Out in Q1, we had Logan Sargent, we had Leclerc, Albon, Magnussen, and Bottas. What the fuck happened to Charles Leclerc in Q1?
Well, he really was just embracing the Ferrari identity. I think he said that he couldn't, like, the car just wasn't feeling right, which, like I said before, I think was just their upgrades missed really badly. But I'm not one to complain about Le Torpedo. It's just Ferrari being Ferrari, it's any week they'll show up and do their thing.
Trust me, Fred Vasseur is going to get it figured out, but he's got to stop making it just as bad, or he's got to stop having it be just as bad as before for him to get out of this hole. And I mentioned earlier about the real, like Patrick said that Ferrari was a real loser with their upgrade. I said it's a who can say, because obviously Leclerc, it was really like a mirror image of Leclerc all the way down to 19th. We'll get to where Sainz finished, but and even at the point is they had to work with Leclerc, who ended up getting a pit lane start because they were trying to figure out what's wrong with the car. So they didn't even know their own car after the upgrades. And of course, the way that Parc Ferme rules have, you can't touch the car after, you can't change and modify the car after qualifying begins. And I'm sure that might be a future Pat's Paddock episode, so I won't go too far into what Parc Ferme, the details of it. But there's a certain curfew for everybody of you can't be working on your car into the wee hours of the night. And
the garage is locked. No one can touch the cars. No one can be in there looking at the cars, looking at data or anything like that. It's a lockout basically until the next morning when the garage opens. Then you have from that time to race start, qualifying start, whatever it might be, to make the changes you wish to make.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it in that time frame, then you could break curfew, but you have to start from the pit lane, or in some cases, there's been disqualifications from the race.
Yep, depending on the situation. But so he's in 19th. He's only, okay, whoop-de-doo. If he starts from the pit lane, you just start one spot worse. And so they eventually had to break it, but that goes to the fact of they can't even figure out their own car after just having an upgrade. It's just mind-boggling to me. And if not for Carlos Sainz's performance, then they would 100% be the biggest losers for me. So we'll get into more of that here shortly.
Moving from Q1 to Q2, nothing happened. I mean, It was boring as hell. It out in Q2 was Yuki in 15th. Then you had DeVries, Joe Granu, you had George Russell, and then Checo Perez. Checo had a little bit of a snap, but it wasn't. I mean, he didn't really have the pace that Max did.
Nah, he came out on a fresh set of tires for his like final-ish flying lap with a couple minutes left. And he gets to the top of the hill at like I think it's like turn 4, and then he starts coming back down at turn like 5 or 6. And I don't know if the track was still wet or he was doing his best Monaco impression. What it could have been. He spins out into the gravel. Luckily, doesn't hit like a wall or anything. After that, he was able to carry on, which is good. But after that, because he was in the gravel, his tires were done and he was slow as balls.
It's a shame because we talked about like it feels like the last 2 or 3 episodes, he had an opportunity to win the drivers' championship. We said, I think I said last episode, you have to make it a clean race. The clean race is not just on Sunday. It starts on Saturday to get you in the opportunity to have a clean race on Sunday. He is not doing that. His hopes and dreams of being a world champion are going out the window. I mean, he's making it incredibly difficult, especially in a contract year where if he keeps doing this, there's no excuse for it not to be Red Bull 1-2 every week.
Right.
Right now, anyways.
Yeah, and I think Helmut Marko he eventually said after the race that because the gap is so big that the pressure is off Checo. But I don't know. I really wish I could just like ask the guy, like, why do you get so ahead of yourself? Because it's like everybody knows that Max is going to blow everybody away. It's like, don't pressure yourself. It's like if you win, okay, cool, bro. Like,
but it's not even that. Like he can't. Max is a better driver. Yes, right. I'm not saying Checo is better. Max is a better driver, but it's 1 lap in qualifying, which for most of these tracks can get you a race win.
Mm-hmm.
Eliminate strategy, eliminate luck, all that shit. If you start from the pole, you're most likely to win. Mm-hmm. That's the benefit of being on pole. They have the same car. Yes, it might be tailored towards Max a little more than Checo, but simple mistakes like spinning out and shit like that is not going to get you in the first place.
He's trying to set a pole lap and he's not even at a Q2. That's all it really is. It's like, bro, just get it clean and then bring it home and take your shot when it's time. But it's just the same mistakes over and over again. I mean,
you hinted at it. My biggest thing is the pressure is like, because at the beginning of the year there were the conspiracy theories and stuff that like,
it was the end of last year whenever Max was asking or Checo was asking to pass Max.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't give it up to him.
Yeah,
that was the start of the drama that you're talking about.
And then after Checo won, I don't know if it was Jeddah. I think it was Jeddah when he won, and like had originally had some tweet and was like, I want to be world champion, and then like deleted the tweet and then reposted the same tweet without the I want to be world champion. So like you had that stuff of like the conspiracy theorists and all that stuff. Now, let's be honest, the pressure's off. To me, that would make it a heck of a lot easier to go get second place every time. You may not win, because Max is clearly blowing the competition. Even if Checo puts together his best race and he starts in second behind Max, Max is winning that race 99 out of 100 times. But there should be no reason that if Max is winning by 30 seconds, that Checo's in second and clear of third by 15 seconds.
I agree. My biggest thing is Checo has pressure. It's not the pressure of winning anymore. It's not the pressure of being a champion. It's the pressure of, I said, it's a contract year. Well, Red Bull fans would much rather see Danny Rick than they would rather see Checo. I love them both, but Danny Rick brings in more money. He brings in more viewers. He brings in a lot more than Checo does. And if you give him that car, I'm not saying he's going to do the same thing that Checo will, but he might do better. And he brings in more money. So if Checo doesn't give Red Bull a second place finish, the majority of the time starting now. I don't know if we'll see him in the car next year. I really don't.
Yeah.
Something to think about. That was Q2. Yuki was out. DeVries, Zhou, Russell, and then Checo finished to cap out Q2. To finish out Q3, starting from pole was Max. And then in second was Carlos Sainz. In third, now we're talking. Lando Norris, baby. I've been keeping this shirt dusted off this entire season. Finally, no doubt in my mind, McLaren's the best team on the grid. I mean, this motherfucker, he just went out there. He was so shocked too. Whenever his race engineer said, "That's P3." Lando, that's P3. He said, "What? Really? Still? Still, motherfucker, you got that bitch." Third place.
Did you hear Max's press conference after qualifying kind of taking a big super dig at McLaren, which personally, as a McLaren supporter, I need that kick in the rear end. I don't know, did y'all hear it?
See what he said?
He said, so basically he was talking about how he was like, yeah, I was just really surprised to see Lando up there in 3. And he goes, and then like they was like, but it's good to see like, some parity. I was like, I was really surprised to see Lando up there in 3. And then he like stopped and went to go put the microphone to give the microphone for another question, and then pulled it back up and goes, let me rephrase that. I am surprised to see McLaren in P3. He's like, Lando is a world-class driver and can win championships in the right car. He's like, I'm not surprised to see Lando up in P3. I'm just shocked to see McLaren in P3. They can't even celebrate P3 right.
Bro, the celebration that McLaren posted of Zach Brown walking around the garage with the race engineers after Lando Norris got P3 was the cringiest thing you've ever fucking seen. Not one sound in the garage was being made. The man's
mouth is glued shut. Just walking around high-fiving everybody, just like hard high fives too. Like, I mean, like embracing, like not like grabbing the hand like that, like just not saying a word.
Couldn't be me.
What'd you say?
I said couldn't be me.
I was celebrating too.
I was like jumping up and down in the break room at work.
But I mean, come on, act like you deserve to be there, right? Zach Brown looked like a Make-A-Wish kid. It's like, dude, come on, come on. I mean, we all knew that Lando was capable of a P3. McLaren's social media was freaking out, rightfully so, but it didn't really last too long. We moved from Q3, where Max got the pole, Carlos was second, Lando was third. Into the race weekend, there were two main things I want to talk about. The first being that Pierre Gasly gets a 6th place grid penalty for impeding Max and Carlos in their Q3 run. That was pretty shitty because it was 2 separate instances where he blocked them. And that it was high-speed turns, not like on a low turn or anything like that. Carlos almost hit Pierre Gasly. The second being that Charles Leclerc and Logan Sargent started from the pits during the race.
Yeah, I mean, it was terrible watching him just slowly take the racing line when it's like, hey, bro, there's people coming in hot behind you, brother. And it was actually pretty funny listening to Fernando's on board because Fernando was coming behind Max and immediately gets on to his race engineer in lawyer mode. And it's like, that's a penalty for Gasly. He's impeding Max on a flying lap. He shouldn't do that. And do we know if Pierre Gasly, did his penalty points ever get erased?
I don't think so. Because they last 2 years, right?
Yeah. So I'm like, I mean, Gasly's already on. Yeah, he's already in thin ice. So it's like, what kind of, but did his race engineer just not tell him there are people coming? I don't quite know.
Here you go. I just looked it up, a quick Google search. Pierre Gasly had 2 penalty points drop on May 22nd. So he was at 10, dropped down the 2, so he was at 8. So I don't know how many points
it's I'm looking at the same thing. So dropping 2 of the 10 points brings him to 8. 12 points in a 12-month period triggers an automatic suspension.
Okay.
So he has 4 remaining penalty points,
Okay.
but that's within a 12-month period.
Okay.
So luckily for him, there's a 2-week break before the next race. So if he races clean in Canada, then he should erase some more points unless he fucks up in Canada. But yeah, that's the big thing to look out for, is because an automatic suspension, I mean, that's
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry. So he's at 8, but he does have 3 coming off soon.
okay.
He'll
He'll be fine. He can stick his head back up his ass a little bit.
I guess had this happened in Imola, he would have literally, I think the day of the race was when the 2 would have dropped off to bring him down from 10, or it was the day after the race. So there would have been like, if he'd have done this at Imola and gotten 2 points for that, he would have had for like one day, he would have been at 12.
Which is a penalty until the next race hits.
Yep.
So you, as long as the FIA gives him that penalty that day, then he's suspended for the next race. But if the FIA does not give him the penalty till the day after, then they can protest it and he'd be fine.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he had his head up his ass. Normally, I don't think Pierre really does that type of stuff.
Well, enough to get a shit ton of penalty points.
Yeah. Well, that's normally during like the race. And then like we had Leclerc and Sargent starting from the pits. Leclerc, I think they were kind of just like, all right, well, let's switch out a bunch of stuff like the morning of the race and just bite the extra place penalty, of which that didn't even really help them anyways. But Ferrari's going to Ferrari, like we said, and Williams is Williams.
Yep. Moving into the race, the big thing was Lando Norris starting 3rd place. Like I said, McLaren's social media was freaking out. You would have thought the Beatles were in town at their prime, not like the dead Beatles, but in their prime, the Beatles were in town. Unfortunately, it didn't last too long. On lap 1, turn 1, Carlos Sainz was following Max Verstappen. He tried to pass him, had a break. Unfortunately, that checked up 3rd place, which was Lando Norris, who did not have a quick enough reaction. And he ended up hitting, his front wing was damaged, and he had to go into the pits, going from 3rd place down to, you guessed it, 20th. I mean, when it rains, it fucking pours. He had an opportunity because there was forecast for rain for this race. Lando Norris is extremely great in the rain, probably one of the best in the rain. He had an opportunity for a would-be podium. That contact, that late reaction, cost him his entire race. I think he finished 17th or something like that.
Something way down there.
I know one out of the. I think it was 17th, and Oscar finished 13th. But there was one of them finished 13th, one of them finished 17th.
Yeah, so Lando finished 17th out of the points for both McLarens. It was just, it was heartbreaking, bro. It was just heartbreaking because Lando is a great driver. It was just an honest mistake. Dude, when I saw that, I was like, you got to be shitting me. After that happened, he hit Lewis and nothing else happened. Like, Lewis didn't have a puncture or anything like that. Nothing happened until lap 16. So lap 16, Carlos Sainz is trying to undercut. We've discussed in the past, undercut means you pit before the car you're racing against pits. That way you come out, you run faster laps, and you get ahead of them by the time they pit. Well, lap 25, Lewis comes to the pits. That's who Carlos Sainz was racing. Carlos Sainz, who did the undercut, actually worked out. Carlos Sainz comes out in front of Lewis Hamilton by the time Lewis Hamilton comes out of the pit lane. From there, Lewis passed Carlos Sainz maybe within 10 laps of coming out of the pits. I want to say it was under 5, but don't quote me on that.
It was quick.
Yeah. The strategy was correct for Ferrari. Unfortunately, the pace was not there. The rest of this race was a snooze fest. I mean, it was prime time around 10 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time, to take a nap. I hope you didn't drink coffee when the race started because it was a snooze fest. From lap 25, when Lewis came out of the pits, up until lap 52, nothing happened. On lap 52, that's when we had a little bit of drama. Not too much, but a little bit. On lap 52, Esteban Ocon was in front of Fernando Alonso. Fernando had DRS, drag reduction system, and he tried to pass Esteban Ocon on the main straight. On the main straight, Esteban goes right to block, and then he goes right even further, a double move, which is against the code, basically. It's not against the rules, but it's against the code of drivers. And they almost crash. Pat, do you think that was a clean move, or do you think that I'm correct saying, like, yeah, he kind of broke the unwritten rules?
To me, the defending was kind of, how do I put this, Nikita Mazepin-esque.
Shitty?
Yeah. Like, I
Okay.
mean, there's plenty of videos of Mazepin almost driving people into the wall. I think Fernando like crossed the pit lane, like that pit lane exit line.
He was in the green paint.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It honestly, I thought Fernando was going to fly off and go into a wall, which thankfully he didn't, because this race was already kind of going to shit just from the lack of pace. And we've seen instances like that. I think the other most recent big one was Lewis versus Checo in Turkey a couple of years ago, where it's honestly almost the exact same scenario, except Checo still got passed. But, you know, I don't really quite know what the etiquette is on, you know, how far you can push someone other than something like that, where it's just off the track, basically. You know, I don't know if it's like, oh, you still need to leave a car width at the edge of the track.
I think it's supposed to be, yeah.
But it definitely was pretty dangerous to do. I thought at least one of them was about to bend it into a wall.
Or get a penalty or something.
Yeah.
Neither Esteban Ocon didn't get a penalty. It wasn't even noted by the FIA. So I guess they deemed it reasonable. But like I said, just because the rules say you can do it doesn't mean there's not a gentleman's unwritten rule.
Yep. That's the big thing. And I think we've seen it with the Indy 500 last week. There was a little bit of a debate on social media just because obviously the tracks are different. Indianapolis Speedway is pretty wide, and the pit entry is just you veer off to the left side of the barrier and go straight on down the track. But there's a lot of blocking, moving to the side. And of course, F1 fans are like, yeah, that's some dangerous type driving. And then IndyCar diehard fans are like, no, that's real racing. So there's really kind of in a weird way, IndyCar and F1 do fall under the FIA's kind of international code of racing. So there's not really a written rule, as we talked about, but it's definitely up for debate on, is this type of just writing someone out, obviously, and there's in F1 and even in IndyCar and all that stuff, these 20 drivers in F1 understand the high risks of it. At some point, they're not going to say, they're not going to squeeze the guy out to where there's an inch, because at the end of the day, that by the grace of God, there goes I getting pushed into a wall and getting just shoved in and bent. So it's just a very big debate. And so I don't think that's something that can be solved in one night, one talk, one. I really wish that we did have not the ramble. I wish we still had the drivers' meetings that were still aired and recorded, that we could sit and watch the drivers have discussions about this.
So my thing is, it was for 7th place. So yes, it's for points, but it's not like it's for the race win. Esteban Ocon just got a podium, so I think that's why he was so intent on blocking him to keep 7th instead of dropping to 8th, which he did because Fernando Alonso actually finished that pass. But it was just something else. That was the last major drama that happened during this race. Like I said, this race was a snooze fest. Not much happened besides those things that we talked about. To finish the race off, we had Max Verstappen win by 30 seconds and pitting within 10 laps of the finish. So if he didn't pit, it could have been over a minute. He lapped everyone up to Piastri.
His fastest lap time was 1 minute, 16 seconds. So that's That's 76 seconds. He was within 3 seconds of lapping everybody up to the points.
So the big aspect of Max Verstappen was he being a good sport or not? So, like we've discussed in the past, a quickest lap in the top 10 gets you another point. That point can be the difference between first and second, third, whatever it is. It's a very minimal distance between these positions for the drivers or the constructors championship. Well, Max Verstappen received the black and white flag 3 times. That was the track limits flag. It means he was going over the white line, all 4 tires, going off the track, basically. Well, Red Bull engineers were basically saying, cool your jets, bro. Take it easy. You're going to win this race. Don't push it and crash. If you crash, there's no excuse, you know? Well, Max said, what, Pat?
To put it lightly, he told him to fuck off.
Basically.
And, the thing about Max is that everyone knows he can be a hothead, but he just really doesn't care like what advice or whatever people are trying to give him. Like, he is very confident in himself. And he was like, nope, I'm going to get this lap. And then they kept pleading with him. And then eventually he was like, all right, fine, like chill, like just shut up. Like, I'll bring it home or whatever. But it's just like, come on, bro. Like, you're like a minute out ahead in front of everybody. Like, you're going to get the fastest lap. Like, it's whatever. But, Max just wants to keep himself to that, X amount higher standard.
He's not battling against anyone. So the only person he has to battle against is himself.
He wants the Grand Slam of the week.
Himself is race engineer.
Yeah. Besides poor helmet, I mean, he's got the mindset of a champion. So right now he's a 2-time world champion, or 1.5, depending on who's asking. It's going to be 3 this year.
Yep.
There's no way around it. It's going to be 3. I wanted to say that him and Checo would compete. Shit ain't happening. Unless there's a major change, it's not happening. That was the Spanish Grand Prix. Like I said, the podium was Max Verstappen. And then you had Lewis Hamilton. You had George Russell following him in 3rd place. Mercedes 2 and 3 was a pretty big shock. Chan, you discussed earlier about, the upgrades. There were losers, winners, saying that Mercedes was a winner. Clearly it showed this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that this took, we were Aston and Mercedes going into this weekend was 1 point apart. And this 2-3 finish, even Aston Martin didn't have a bad showing per se of 6th and 7th. But just that 2-3 finish pole vaulted them ahead by a decent number. And it's going to make it where we will probably have something to watch for, coming down the stretch to see this. Just because last year we had the situation of Ferrari versus Mercedes in second. You had Mercedes that was like, Ferrari was fast, couldn't finish half the races. Mercedes was not as fast, but they were reliable. They were going to get you the second and third. And we didn't see that much of, like, to start the year, it wasn't consistently a Mercedes on the podium. But now I think we're starting to see it, and I'm looking forward to it. Now, on the flip side of that is that Fernando has come out and said, like, and I quote, he says, we got more upgrades to roll out in Canada, and then another set of upgrades to roll out at Silverstone. He says, but, and like what he ended, he just goes, I'll just say this, in Canada, we'll crush them. So I can't wait to see what that involves. But I think we're in for some excitement. Like somebody joked on social media said the only way to watch F1 races was to put like a piece of paper blacking out the first place, because you already know that's going to be Max, and then you're just watching the rest of the races like on that. So that's how someone watched the Spanish Grand Prix, is they put a little piece of paper over the first place sidebar of the running total. So.
Well, Chandler talks a little bit about the upcoming race. That is the Canadian Grand Prix. That's going to be June 16th through the 18th. Qualifying is going to take place on Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and the race is going to take place on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Practice on Friday was sunny and 70, and then qualifying was raining and 40 degrees, and then the race was sunny and 85 degrees. So looking forward to my favorite track on the calendar.
Last weekend, we discussed our predictions for the Spanish Grand Prix. Chandler said Fernando Alonso was going to get the win. Fucking loser. Terrible guess. I guessed that Lewis Hamilton will get the win. Everyone was hating. I was one spot off. I should have known.
That's a big one spot. That's a big one spot.
It's just one. Either way, Patrick came home with the win. He predicted Max Verstappen to get the W. Max Verstappen destroyed everybody, but I beat Chandler, so that's fine with me. Second place is the number one loser, still number one. We move into the Canadian Grand Prix.
Third place is still on the podium.
Out of 3.
Doesn't matter. Like, third place is still on the podium.
That's like the hottest ugly girl. But either way, let me hear your guys' predictions for the Canadian Grand Prix. Pat, you won. You get the honors. Who do you think wins the Canadian Grand Prix?
So Max is going to destroy it again, especially with a really low downforce track like Canada.
Chan, who's your winner?
I am going contrary again. I'm not just simply picking Max. I will not pick Max again just for entertainment value. Max finally learns why they call it the Wall of Champions. And I am going to say that Lewis Hamilton wins in Canada.
You motherfucker. That's who I was going
to. Yes. Yes.
I could either pick George Russell or I could pick Max Verstappen. I think I go with. I don't know who I want to pick.
You can just pick Lewis too, bro. It's okay.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with Max Verstappen.